Let's open up the Vintage Collection 3.75-inch figure of Moff JerJerrod. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. Now I know this Moff JerJerrod figure, VC284, is a slightly older figure, but I'm quite excited to be opening him up today because, as luck would have it, I picked him up today for half price. Now I'm quite a fan of the lesser known Star Wars characters, the background ones, the Imperial officers, but I am also aware that they generally don't sell very quickly when they get made in action figure form. So as much as I would like to pick up all of my figures the day I very first spot them, I know that I can generally wait, bide my time, and pick them up on sale. Now, one of my favorite places in New Zealand to pick up Star Wars toys is a department store, The Warehouse, and one particular branch in my home city of Auckland is unfortunately closing down, but that meant they were clearancing out their toy section at half price. So my patience paid off. I picked up this figure for my collection at half price, and the card is still in really good condition, so I'm really excited to be adding Moff JerJerrod to my vintage collection, and I can't wait to open him up. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll take the action figure out of the bubble. We'll check out all of his details and his one accessory, but first let's take a quick look at the backing card. The backing card style for the Vintage Collection line of action figures is of course heavily inspired by the original Kenner vintage action figures from the 1970s and 80s. We can see the same logo design and that chrome racetrack print surrounding the character art off to the right hand side on both of these cards. On this backing card, we have the iconic Return of the Jedi film logo here at the top in red, and because this is a slightly older figure, we also have the 40th anniversary Return of the Jedi logo here on the front of the backing card in the top left corner. For Moff JerJerrod, we have an accent color of blue. We can see that for the nameplate here with the black font for the character title reading Moff JerJerrod, and also that same blue accent color in behind the figure here. Now, of course, Imperial officers generally don't come with a lot of accessories, but it does look like his hat is removable. I'm quite excited to check that one out. We can see we have that one single figure there and also a small blaster weapon accessory there as well. We've got quite a nice actual character art print here on the right hand side next to the bubble. When it comes to a lot of the original trilogy characters, they didn't really have the most highest definition reference pictures. Sometimes some of the characters are quite dark, a little bit grainy, but this one's actually a really nice, clear, well-lit image. Perhaps not quite as sharp as some of the backing cards that we get for the modern era of films, but I think it's actually quite nice. We can see some iconic sort of Imperial design behind him there, and we've got some really nice costume details there. It really does look like a promotional still from the 1980s here. Really nice. And of course, we also have that Kenner logo down under the bottom of that picture there as well. Moving on to the back, you can see that this one is VC284, released before Hasbro changed the backing card style for the Vintage Collection line. This is a little bit more heavily inspired by the original Kenner backing cards where we had the lineup of other figures to collect. Nowadays we have that large accent color and a picture of the backing card. I'm kind of mixed. Some figures I really like this older style here. You can see we've got a lineup of other figures released around the same time. We can see that strong Return of the Jedi lineup with a lot of Jabba's Palace and Skiff Guard characters there. Quite fun. And of course we have the Star Wars logo and the double chrome racetrack there around those pictures there. We also have the Vintage Collection logo here on the back, and the rest of the backing card is barcode, copyright, all of that kind of stuff. So I'm really happy with the condition of my backing card considering this is a slightly older figure and I did pick it up on half price. It's got pretty good corners, the hanger's not ripped or anything like that, as I like to keep my backing cards even when I open my figures, but I'm really excited to finally add this one to my collection, so let's go ahead and open them up. So now I have Moff JerJerrod and his single blaster pistol accessory out of the packaging so we can take a closer look. The first thing that I wanted to check once I got him out of the packaging was to check and make sure that his hat was indeed removable. Not that that would have been a deal breaker, but there's just something about the sculpting that makes it look like it is a separate piece. So let's just go ahead and check. Yep, that comes right off. That's quite nice. And you can see that we do have that slightly rubbery plastic there, so it does have a pretty good grip. I have to say, that's actually a really good fit. There are some figures, I want to say, I think it's like the Cassian Andor figure. There is definitely a figure that I've opened up in the last few months that had sort of an Imperial cap that just wanted to fall off every time I touched it. And this one, it just grips on really nicely. So of course we do have that sort of slightly sort of added ridge there because it's a separate component. It's always going to look just a little bit bigger, but I do kind of like the fact that we've got, you know, at least one removable accessory there, and I think it actually looks not too bad. It fits on really nicely, and of course we can change the angle of sort of the cap brim here a little bit, sort of sit it back a little bit there. It's actually a really good fit. I like that rubbery feel. I quite like that. So we can see the likeness here of the actor who played Moff JerJerrod there. It can be a little bit tricky trying to make sort of, you know, some of the sort of the not too distinct characters sort of stand out here. He's just, you know, sort of looking like a dude working on the second Death Star there, but he's got a pretty nice, good sculpt there. It does look like Moff JerJerrod. It's a little bit tricky to sort of, you know, when they're just wearing very similar outfits to a lot of other Imperial characters, but it looks recognizable as Moff JerJerrod. We've got the distinctive hair there, and I really like that hat going on the top there, giving us just a little bit of an option there. And of course we do have distinctive Moff ranks here. We've got an Imperial rank badge there with 3 blue, 3 red, painted quite nicely there. When it comes to Imperial outfits, you want the details to be sharp because there's just not much else there. So when they're mispainted, it really draws the eye. We have a single silver code cylinder on either side of the jacket there. We have a standard issue Imperial belt here, black. It does have just the tiniest sort of ridges there on what would be the leather belt, which I quite like. And of course we have the iconic silver belt buckle there and a single silver stud there to the left of the belt buckle there as well. Again, nice painting there on the silver belt buckle. It's not spilling over. Sometimes I get a little bit bothered by some of the paintwork around the belts. I opened up a Grand Admiral Thrawn figure, and because we have such a strong contrast between the white of his tunic and the black of his belt, if the painting's not tidy, it really catches your eye. Now when it comes to the sort of a darker Imperial officer tunic, the sort of slightly sort of green, sort of olive color, that's less of a contrast there. So I can see just here, really hard to show, just on the top of the belt, it's not completely painted black, but because this is such a darker contrasting color, I can't really see it. I have to look really, really tight in there, and I'm sure it's possibly not even showing up much on camera either. It's just really, really minimal. So I'm quite happy with the paint job here. It's not spilling over. I haven't got black on the tunic or too much tunic color there on the belt there as well. And that continues round to the back there as well. I'm sort of testing out some of the articulation here on the belt, but that's really nice tidy paintwork there. It looks like, oh, I might have just the tiniest little bit of tunic paint here just on the belt. Tiny, really looking up close. But of course, I'm already testing out some of the articulation here. We've got black gloves, which is quite nice. I like the sort of put all together a sort of very formal Imperial look to match his glossy knee-high black riding boots that we have here. And of course, these are probably reissued parts, reused parts from other Imperial characters. We've got that sort of iconic sort of cross boot sort of strap here that we've got, where it looks like sort of a little leather strap crossing across to sort of close up the back of the boot there, make them a little bit tighter around the calves. Something that we see on a lot of the modern vintage collection figures depicting certainly a lot of the Imperial characters. So I'm fairly certain that is probably a reused part. For Moff JerJerrod, we have the sort of original trilogy style flared jodhpur pants. This is accurate to the Imperial outfits from the original trilogy. They are sort of based off riding outfits or older military style uniforms here. So we have those flared pants, quite nice there. I like the draping that we've got there, sort of showing those very distinctive shaped pants there. So of course, it's going to be fairly standard for an Imperial tunic here. Whether or not it's terribly accurate to Moff JerJerrod specifically. I do think we've got quite a nipped in shape. I think some of the older Imperial characters are going to be perhaps a little bit broader through the chest. This is quite sort of a narrow band across the waist. I don't think it's perhaps the most accurate to the physique of Moff JerJerrod in the Return of the Jedi, but I'll take it. I know that they probably, Hasbro doesn't really want to be retooling Imperial jackets for every subtle difference of the actors on a screen, so I do understand for a figure that they know is probably not going to be flying off the shelves, I can give them a pass on sort of reusing torso pieces here. I do like the sculpting. We've got the sort of modern era where they give us just these little wrinkles, making it look like fabric, the way that it sort of hangs and creases, the way fabric would hang on the body when worn. We can see even the seams here in the back are included in the sculpt. We've got the seam running down at the back of the sleeves and that curve seam of the jacket coming up into the shoulder seam there, really nice. And just those sort of wrinkles there, and lots of wrinkles there on the pants. I do like the way that the sculpting on the pants comes down to the top of the boots. We can see the way that it sort of angles. We can see the articulation there in the back. So I like the fact that the thigh piece comes down to just touch at the top of the boots. It really sort of hides the articulation there on the knees, which I quite like there. And of course, as I was testing out before, we do have a mid-torso articulation here, matching up really nicely with that belt. It's just the perfect spot to add in some articulation there. So pretty good in terms of the paint job, in terms of the costume details here, just about what I would expect from an iconic Imperial character. So let's quickly check the articulation. Now for this character, I have to say we do have a bit more of a gap at the shoulders than I have seen on some figures. It kind of gives the appearance that the sleeves are separate to the main sort of body part of the jacket here, because we've got this sort of gap here. I have seen it tighter this side in particular. We've got a little bit of a gap here, but at least the colors are all matching. It doesn't sort of give us too much of sort of a jarring. In particular, if it's supposed to look like a jacket and the sleeves are perhaps painted and this is plastic, sometimes you get those tone differences. At least because the gloves are separate and they're black, everything seems to be made out of the same color plastic, so we don't get any color differences here. It really bothers me when Hasbro does ones where the plastic and the paint are supposed to match in color, but they don't, and so you get these really sort of strong contrasting sort of colors, and I don't like it. Though I must have to admit, the top part of the tunic here is hard plastic, as we would expect, but the lower half is flexible. We've got those side splits up each side, so we can articulate the legs a little bit. But it's a really, really good match. Sometimes between different plastics, you can get a little bit of a tone. But if I'm looking up really, really, really close, you know, under very good lighting, there might be a tiny bit lighter color in the rubbery sort of flexible plastic of the lower half of the tunic compared to the top. But I'm being very, very particular. If I'm just looking at him like this, he looks the same color, and that's what I hope. So let's get on and test out the articulation. He's already feeling really nice with the movement. So we've got very nice, good movement there for the head. Of course, Imperials can't do too many exaggerated poses. I like to think of them sort of just basically posing with their arms and their head to give them that sort of Imperial sort of look of superiority there, sort of looking up and sort of doing those sorts of poses. He does come with a blaster accessory. We'll test that out very shortly, but I'm personally not going to be posing him with that. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be posing him in terms of his arms. He might just be sort of standing in the background with his arms down by his side, but let's just test out his articulation anyway. So nothing in getting in the way when it comes to sort of rotating up. I can get his arms quite high, actually. If I sort of pull them up, he can go higher than sort of straight across. A lot of figures, they kind of tap out about there. He can actually lift his arms up even further. Very, very nice. Of course, we start to see the articulation sort of showing a little bit more on the underside there, but hey, that's really nice to see in terms of just the freedom of movement there. So as expected at the elbows, we can rotate those out as well. Now he's got side to side articulation here with the hands. We've got a little bit of sort of a side to side rocking movement. Now I do find with Imperial tunics that sleeve comes down and kind of cuts in around the hand a lot, so we don't get a lot of that side-to-side movement. You can see I'm not really getting much there. Certainly not enough to really notice it for a pose, but we can rotate the hand all the way around. We do have an extended trigger finger here on his right hand. We've got that sort of iconic sort of grip there. For the other hand, we have a front to back rocker. We can see that very strongly there in the front. Black on black, but it is quite noticeable on the front there. And to be honest, I'm not getting, oh, there we go. Finally got, that one's a bit more stiff, but I did actually get him to pull his hand in it there. I get to about there. So that's pretty good in terms of movement there. He does not have an extended trigger finger on this hand. It is a bit more of a grip, but I have to say it's kind of slightly awkward, and I'm not sure. It just looks kind of thicker in this part here. It's hard to kind of explain. It's not like a defect. I think it's just the way that it's sort of sculpted because of the movement. We've got an articulation point. It's a little bit hard to get the camera to focus on it because it's black. Because we've got the articulation point kind of in the base of his hand, it's giving him sort of a very thick base to his hand. So it kind of looks a bit thick and chunky, which I'm not the biggest fan of, to be honest, in terms of a hand there. But if I put it down by his side, I'm not really going to notice that too much. I prefer the sort of the side-to-side movement. I feel like that's more my sort of favorite sort of, doesn't cut in to the hand shape quite as much. Still a little bit thick through sort of the palm of the hand here, but not as bad as the way that it is on this one. Something about this just looks very thick. But articulation in the waist. Bit clicky, but it is free. That's quite nice. He's not snapping back too centered like some figures do. I don't like that. I like being able to move and pose my figures without feeling like I might break them. And I don't have any worries there. He's turning very nicely. And as I was testing out with his belt before, he does have a reasonable, I can lean him back, lean him just a little bit forward. He's not holding a really deep pose, but enough. He's not snapping back to neutral. There is a little bit of a click there. He is holding his position, which is good. So the tricky part with these ones, with these lower sort of rubbery tunics, you can see we've got a bit of a flex there. We do have a side split on both sides, a little bit of sort of a circular curve at the top to try and avoid splitting up higher. But if you really pull, you will probably create a split which will travel up to the top. So I am going to be just a little bit gentle here. So pulling it up, you can see we've got that a swivel sort of seam there at the top of the thigh, as well as the articulation in the hip joint there. So we can move his thighs side to side by rotating at that articulation point there. Now generally I'm not a fan of this particularly too much, but if it's hidden, I don't mind it. I just don't like when I'm really interrupting the sculpting. You can see with this sculpting part here becoming misaligned with the side, it starts looking a bit odd, but because the tunic's sort of hiding that, I don't mind it so much. So we've got that sort of ability to sort of twist the legs to help us with some poses. Sometimes action figures just need a little bit of tweaking to really get them to stand up straight. So we can see the knee articulation there, just sort of hitting with the sort of sculpting of the thighs, the pants there, but that's pretty decent. I wouldn't expect an Imperial officer to be kicking up higher than that in the back. Very nice movement there at the ankles as well. Generally, I don't have too much of an issue with the Imperial boot sculpt. I find it being quite good for these characters. I've never really had too much of an issue with that. So of course we can rotate both of those legs. The big trick here is how far forward can we go? Okay, that's pretty good actually. Not really going to be doing a lot of kicking with these guys, but that's actually a pretty good. And I'm not stressing this side split too much. I'm not too worried about that one. We'll test the other side. You can see getting a reasonable sort of kick there. I'll just swivel his leg up to the right spot. There we go. And of course we can also go out to the side. Again, I'm not really going to make him straddle beasts to ride, but you can see the articulation style there underneath his tunic, just to kind of give you an idea. Perhaps you do want to put him on a dewback or something like that. He does actually get quite wide in the legs there because of course we've got that side split. he's able to open his legs up there. Perhaps we're going to put him, it's a shame we don't see them sort of, you know, riding speeders or creatures quite as much as we see stormtroopers. I think that would be kind of interesting. So overall, pretty much as I would expect, you know, Imperial officers, they're pretty much what you see on the box when you see them in their packaging. I do like the way his hat fits there. Nice tidy paintwork on the little sort of silver stud detail on the cap there as well. Quite nice and tidy there. So I'm quite happy with the paint. As I mentioned earlier, I got this one half price at a store that was clearancing out everything. So there was just the one on the shelf. Usually when it comes to my Star Wars action figures, I like to compare the paint job and sort of detail work on the figure and also the condition on the backing card. And I really didn't have to worry too much about this one. I mean, when you look at the paintwork on the face, really nice tidy work there on the eyes, the eyebrows, even just the tiniest little touch there on the lips. And of course I couldn't see with the cap on in the backing card packaging, but very nice tidy paintwork along his hair. Of course his hair is sculpted as part of the head. It's not a separate piece, but we've got a really nice tidy hairline painted there, and we've just got a really sort of minimal sort of hair detail work. It's not too thick because it does have to fit under the hat. And we do see just a little bit poking out there around the ears and around the temples and at the back, but very nice. Of course, you know, when you can't see painting details, it could have been really smudged, it could have looked awful, but really nice to see once you get them out of their packaging, everything is as you hope. So let's take a quick look at the blaster pistol accessory. We don't really need this piece. I'm not too bothered about this one. It is a little bit flat. It's kind of fun. You know, I know that, you know, back in the old era, even in the Kenner era, we still got some quite inventive sort of accessories so that young fans could still sort of play Star Wars space battles with every character. So I guess this is intended for perhaps the younger fan that still wants to sort of play out conflicts between the Empire and the Rebellion. But for me, as sort of recreating scenes, I don't really need this accessory. He doesn't have a holster, but there we go. A dark grey sort of with a small blaster pistol with a sort of bit of a scope there, an enclosed trigger guard, and a very small little emitter there. So there is a little bit of a flex to it. If I'm very careful, you can just sort of see there is a little bit of a wobble to it. It's not brittle, but it is quite small. I'm probably just going to be storing this one away, to be honest, but let's quickly check and see how well he's going to hold it, because he does have an extended trigger finger. So I'm hoping that this will fit in. Not too difficult. That was nice and easy. Goes in there. To be honest, that's not actually too bad. I don't know that I will pose him like this, but if you want to do some sort of cool, you know, perhaps he's leading a battalion of stormtroopers or something, that's not too bad. I know not every character is, you know, sometimes us collectors can get a little bit adventurous. Sometimes we're sort of grabbing random characters and creating different scenes beyond what we see on a screen. So perhaps this is him in a different role when he is not on the second Death Star. Perhaps he is chasing down rebels on some other planet before his post on the second Death Star. And this looks kind of cool. I don't actually mind it. I was like, don't need the blaster pistol, but we do have some options here, and that looks pretty good in his hand. So I'm actually fairly happy with that one, even though I didn't think I was really going to be really that fast either way. But there we go. That is Moff JerJerrod VC284 from the Vintage Collection line in the 3.75-inch action figure scale. Fairly standard figure. He's not going to be terribly exciting, but of course I'm happy to be able to knock off another one of the Vintage Collection from my Star Wars collection checklist for half price. You know, I kind of feel a little bit mean sort of seeing figures on the shelves going, maybe next time, maybe when you're a bit cheaper, but I'm sure I'm not the only collector that is trying to make their collecting budget stretch to fit as many Star Wars collectibles as you can. So as much as I would love to be able to just grab every figure the minute it hits store shelves, sometimes you know deep down they're not going to disappear and you can bide your time and pick them up on sale. In saying that, this guy is actually getting quite hard to find here in New Zealand. There was one local store that I was kind of keeping an eye on him, making sure that he didn't disappear, but lo and behold, he was at the store that was half half off, so I was very excited to finally check him off my list. Really great condition figure. The backing card was surprisingly good condition considering how old this figure is by now, and I'm really happy to add another Imperial to my collection. He's surprisingly good. Very, very happy with this one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars vintage collection figure and checked out the details and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a vintage collection fan, I recently opened up the Grand Admiral Thrawn figure, VC387. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole vintage collection playlist. This is the way.